Okay, we are live this morning and it's the Senate Transportation Committee and it's Wednesday morning. And we're going to have a discussion on S99, the motor vehicle miscellaneous bill, which I understand the House passed this morning. And Anthea is with us this morning to go through some of the changes or things that we have to consider. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you for having me. So for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I believe Hayden has printed out 3 documents for you. One should look familiar. It's the section by section summary that's been updated to reflect, at the time, it was the House Transportation Committee's strike all amendment. That is now, I can tell you, as your chair just told you, what you will be seeing come back to you as the House proposal of amendment. There are no floor amendments. House Ways and Means and House Appropriations didn't make any changes to the bill. And the only question that was on the floor was a question that this committee actually spent a lot of time with last year, and it was in the total abstinence program and whether or not cannabis that is consumed by someone who's on the medical registry, if that was intentionally not covered by the definition of drug. And that was answered on the floor before third reading today. And the member who was asking it was not here last year, and the member who was presenting on it was not on the committee last year. So they didn't know all of the conversations that had been behind what was then Senator Pierce's amendment. So you have your section by section summary. You also have the side by side, which is the document that I'm going to walk through. And then you have a little checklist document that just will show you the differences, the sections where there is a difference between the two. If it's red, it's either something you haven't seen before, or it's something that the House has proposed an amendment that would change what you had. If it's in black font, then there is no difference between the bodies. So you are at a point of agreement on those sections unless you wish to change the language now further. So working through our side by side, no changes on the new motor vehicle arbitration. This is the piece that mimicked the language about the time that a owner of a vehicle would have to refile a claim if they ended up being satisfied, but then unsatisfied with the repair that was made as part of the new motor vehicle arbitration board process. No changes there. No changes in section 2. This was the definition of mail. No changes in mobile identification, section 3. No changes in sections 4 to 13.
Wow, we're doing good.
Which were all of the places in codified law where you needed to take out the validation sticker piece. Where you're going to get your first change, and it's going to be new language, is going to be on page 12. So one of the things that was discovered when the other body was working on the language is that there are actually 2 places in rule that reference the validation stickers. One has to do with snowmobiles and one has to do with the administrative penalty if a dealer is driving a vehicle that doesn't have the validation sticker on it. So what section 14 does is it notwithstands those 2 portions of those rules and says that the Department of Motor Vehicles is not supposed to follow those rules. Those become effective on passage. And in both instances, it directs the DMV to update the rule to include reference to validation stickers the next time those rules are updated. And I think as part of the modernization project, the DMV is looking at some of its rules.
Would the committee like to okay as we go through or not okay? That would be that way we can concentrate on.
Well, our snowmobile person, what do you say about that?
Yeah, you're our snowmobile guru.
Well, this was just an oversight.
I think it was just an oversight. When we were looking for all the places in codified law, we just didn't do a search in the rules.
Okay. So are we all right with page 12 and 13?
I would be.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. All right.
I would default speed limits, and I knew that was coming.
So
DMV had any problems with that? No? Okay. All right. Just jump in if you think there's something to consider. Okay. Yes, go ahead, sir.
So no changes in electronic proof of registration. This is saying that you can show registration on your mobile electronic device and that grace period. No changes there. No changes on the 2 sections that had to do with clarifying current statute. I'm on the top of page 15. Clarifying statute with respect to if it is a pleasure car that is also a plug-in electric vehicle, it pays the pleasure car rate, not the specialized motor fuel rate. So no changes there. Section 17 and 18, this was,
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Did that just come up because DMV noticed it, or was there an issue? Somebody got
I think that would be the question.
So what we found was that there were some inconsistencies as to what was being done. When we had it reviewed by our Attorney General, he basically indicated, we took it to mean that all pleasure cars are $74 and all electric pleasure cars were $74. The interpretation is all electric vehicles would be 74, including your large trucks. So this is really codifying what we're doing and making it as what we want.
Not just the electric pleasure cars. So
Correct.
the electric, other bigger cars will have the other,
They would go to the other fuels.
some were only getting charged or potentially getting charged just the 74.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, so now at the bottom of page 15, you'll see that 2 sections have been deleted. This was the change in the statutory default speed limit for unpaved and unposted roads, and then the required outreach. Instead, you will see at the end of the bill in section 43 that there is going to be outreach from the agency in consultation with the lead on 2 municipalities for what they can do with respect to lowering speed limits and enforcement.
Within their own authority, which is nothing. I mean, in other words, you can do what you already are authorized to do now. It's gratuitous language, but all right.
What's requiring them to do outreach on what is already in law?
Good.
Are you all right?
I'm fine. I knew this was coming, so, yeah.
It really did come down to a lot of the MUTCD and the federal highway interpretation about where the signs would need to be.
Okay, Jane's all right with it?
Yeah, no, I knew, I'd already been told it was.
All right.
Okay, so we're now on section 18. This starts at the very bottom of page 17, but it's mostly on page 18 and
Okay.
forward. You'll remember Representative Shaw came in and spoke about a bill that he introduced, which was really trying to address the argument that law enforcement is hearing now, which is, oh, I wasn't using my phone, I was holding my phone. So he had introduced a bill
tell you.
that was intended to really tighten the definition of what it means to be using something in hands-free use. And this language has undergone some modifications from what Representative Shaw introduced. House Transportation had testimony from law enforcement on it. It's doing a lot of reorganization in the section. The definitions were kind of scattered throughout the section. So it seems like a lot of things are being struck out, but really what's happening is a lot of things are moving. So all of the definitions would be in subsection A. Just for the hands-free use definition, and this is at the top of page 18, providing clarity on the fact that hands-free use means without using in any way, utilizing, and sort of shifting from the use word when it's not using, but
Utilizing and use are substantially different.
I don't think they're substantially different, but
What does that get us then?
well, so law enforcement wanted to not use the word use in non-hands-free use, because there's not a non-hands-free use. If you're using it in non-hands-free use, you're using it. So trying not to use the word use at all.
Well, it does say without use of either hand, that's
Yes.
currently law,
That's current law.
but we're gonna say utilizing either hand rather than use either.
I would not say that was a substantive difference at all. The substantive difference with the definition of hands-free use is to add the piece where you would be utilizing an internal feature
Whereas,
of, at the very end of that subdivision, the device or a motor vehicle. So if on your steering wheel, there are buttons that you
Oh,
can
so now
press,
you're defining use, okay.
hands-free use. Public highway, this is not a new definition. This is the definition that's used in the balance of the section, but this is a significant definition to point out, because if you'll remember when Captain Davidson came in to testify about your motorcycle language, which we'll get to the fact that that's been deleted, but he was saying, don't in Title 23
Oh,
use the definition of highway from Title 19. It's going to confuse law enforcement because they're trained on the Title 23 definition. This is very intentional. Representative Corcoran brought up some of the historic back and forth when this language was being worked on years ago, because the definition of public highway in Title 19 is narrower than the definition in Title 23, because Title
We
23.
talked about that.
Yeah, so this public highway, I'm pointing it out, and you'll see later on where it comes into play, is the narrower, basically on a road definition of public highway.
So we're lawing off his testimony?
It was taken up in House Transportation, and House Transportation, for the reasons based on historic discussions and how public highway is being used in this section, wanted to continue using the narrower definition of public highway. That's also consistent with how public highway is defined for purposes of the other distracted driving statutes, like 1099, which is the one on texting.
Does that mean you can use your phone in a parking lot or at a?
In some instances, and we'll get to that when we are looking at what the prohibition
What was the
applies
other
to.
one? That's like fairgrounds or something?
Yeah, would be another one. Okay, so securely mounted,
It won't matter because you're not going to hit it anyway.
securely mounted, this definition was tinkered with a little bit in House Transportation. And to be clear, nothing in 1095B says that your phone needs to be securely mounted. It's just if you're using it in hands-free use in some instances, it needs to be securely mounted. So securely mounted means that the portable electronic device is placed in an accessory specifically designed or built, and the or built is to account for someone who's making their own mounting device. To support this there was a lot of testimony on it.
I feel all the time spent on this.
To support the hands-free use of a portable electronic device, and it can't be affixed to the windshield in a way that violates the obstruction of the windshield statute. But it needs to either be utilized in accordance with manufacturer specifications, or it needs to keep the portable electronic device stationary under typical driving conditions. So it can't be something that you like jerry-rig to your steering wheel. Apparently people were doing this because that's not remaining stationary. But if you could make sort of a wooden bracket that is going to keep your phone stationary with like a rubber band on it, that would probably meet the definition. So they talked about that a lot. And then Senator Kitchell, part of why utilizing was used was because use is now being defined, and use is really anything that's not hands-free use, including if it's in your hand or hands. So trying to drill down on the argument
You know,
that
both hands on?
no hands on the steering wheel, both hands on the phone. Drill down on the fact that you can't say, I wasn't using my phone, I was holding my phone, because if you're holding your phone, it falls under the definition of using your phone, even if you're not actually using your phone to function as a phone. So subsection B, this is where you get to your prohibitions. So you cannot use a handheld portable electronic device if you're an individual and you're operating the vehicle and it's a moving motor vehicle in a place open temporarily or permanently to public or general circulation of vehicles. So that's going to be in a parking lot. So if you are driving a vehicle in a parking lot, you can't be using your phone. However, if you're on a public highway, you can't use it at all, whether or not it's moving or not. So if you're stationary in a parking lot, you can use your phone. If you're stationary on the public highway, you can't use your phone.
So rest
but there
area
are some
considered
exceptions.
public highway,
A rest area would not fall under the definition of public highway.
or, they have
That
to
means
pull off.
pull off the side of the road, that's highway,
Not part of the highway.
not part of that.
I think it would be part of the Title 23 definition of highway because it's open to general circulation, but I don't think it would fall under the Title 19 definition of highway, which is why I think this is a place where using the narrower definition does help achieve policy goals of there are places where it's safe to use your phone that are open to general circulation, provided that you're not driving your vehicle. But then we get to all of our exceptions. So the exceptions are,
Who's gonna know this?
Yeah.
And the general public will know
Yeah, how would
this.
you refer this? I'll give it to the officer.
The officers will. know, yeah. Yes, that's
Training
it.
council.
Oh,
Training council.
yeah.
they do get a lot of money to provide outreach on distracted driving.
Who is they?
The Governor Highway Safety Council.
Put up these definitions. On the signs. and
Yeah.
stuff.
Uh-huh.
Put up the statutory definitions of everything.
That ought to be a real snoozer.
Okay, so we have
Go ahead.
So if I'm on the side of a highway and I put it at park,
Is that?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
So you now have your general prohibitions. Open to general circulation and you're driving your vehicle on a public highway in any way, including if you're temporarily stationary. But we have exceptions. So the prohibition doesn't apply to hands-free use, which we have defined, provided that, to activation or deactivation of hands-free use. So if you use like a finger to activate hands-free use, provided that the portable electronic device is securely mounted, or the activation or deactivation is done through an internal feature of the device, Hey Siri or Hey Google, or if it is done through an internal feature of the vehicle, pressing the button that then can activate it through.
I think some of those buttons, I'm telling you, there's so many different things. You take your eyes off the road. You know.
Yeah, I don't want to get off track on it, but these things, when these electric vehicles, they advertise how big the screens are now.
I know.
It just doesn't make sense, but anyways.
Yeah, so we're focusing on one little thing, but, you know, and I agree there's risk, but there's tremendous risk on many of those control panels. Because you have to take your eyes off the road to even punch them. But that's why it's good to just have my little Honda. I don't have, you know, I just have the normal gauges and that's it.
What happens in your Honda when you say, hey Siri?
Nothing,
Oh.
nothing. I don't have any
Your
of
passenger says, I'm not Siri.
That's right. My son says, I'm not either.
I'm not Siri.
Oh my God, they must have spent at least 6 weeks on this.
So how are we doing in all this language?
Well, let's get
There are
through
a
it.
few more exceptions. So third exception is if using the electronic device is necessary to communicate with law enforcement or emergency service personnel under emergency circumstances, that's existing law, or in response to a direction or order from law enforcement. And this was included to address the situation where if a road is closed completely because like there's been a really bad accident, or maybe there was a stuckage in the notch and you can't get through, that's being done in response to an order from law enforcement. So you could use your phone if you were on the highway then.
In response to a direction or order, where would that come from? A sign? I mean, I'm just sort of, how does law enforcement direct you?
If law enforcement was out on the road and they were saying the road's closed, stay where you are, I'm sure there are other.
Use your phone to do anything?
You call law enforcement.
Well,
I don't really understand.
I don't either. I'm struggling to know why that's there.
So if the road is closed, use your phone to call your friend.
Mhm.
And where-
Provided that it's closed in response to a direction or order from law enforcement. So if law enforcement has closed the road and you're stuck on it,
Where
you
does
would
it
be
say
able
that
to.
this road is supposed to be closed?
It doesn't.
Okay.
I was using that as the example
How about
of
the
the
order?
scenario that prompted why House Transportation chose to add this language.
So in other words, if you're stuck on the Notch Road, and you use your phone because you're stuck, then you could use it and not violate being in a roadway.
And not have to, and we're getting to the exception, but pull completely off the highway.
You got a bigger problem if you're stuck in the not using your phone.
I gave you about 2,600 reasons why.
Yeah.
You're not moving. You
Yeah.
get out of your car and use the phone.
Yeah.
Oh,
That could be, that's considered an emergency circumstance.
It wouldn't be an emergency circumstance because it's or in response to a direction or
But
order.
they're not
from law
moving.
enforcement. Yes.
in any case, they're not moving.
It doesn't say that you're not moving. So if it's to communicate with law enforcement under an emergency circumstance, you could use your phone in your hand for an emergency purpose under this exception, or in response to a direction or order from law enforcement. I think probably what is going to happen is law enforcement officers, if there is a stuckage and you are stuck on the road and you can't move for hours and they've closed the road to get the vehicle up, they're not going to issue tickets if they see people sitting in their turned off
Well,
car.
the same thing could happen in a snowstorm where, you know, we've seen, yeah, or you're stuck on a New York throughway. Oftentimes you could be like 5 or 6 hours in the snow.
So it's not really a response to a direction or order from law enforcement if you're just in a traffic jam.
And I think it would need to be more than just a traffic jam.
But you wouldn't know, like maybe there's an accident and the road's closed, but you wouldn't know. But nobody's gonna give you a ticket, so we don't.
Senator Kitchell said, right, who's gonna figure all this out anyway?
Yeah.
Drive it up and all this stuff.
Okay. Fourth exception, not a change to current law, using an ignition interlock device. Fifth exception, to use GPS, again, it needs to be securely mounted, not a change from existing law, but this is where you have the movement of the securely mounted definition. And the final exception, and Senator Chittenden, this is what you asked about, when the operators move the motor vehicle to the side of or off the public highway and is halted with or without the motor running in a location where the vehicle can safely and lawfully remain stationary. And I think there would be some level of law enforcement interpretation there. So that would be you pulled off into, the shoulder and it's safe to use your phone. That also probably is an emergency situation.
What if the car doesn't have them?
Yes.
Was this language vetted and approved, and did they take testimony from law enforcement of the Department of Motor
Must
Vehicles?
have.
Yes. I took testimony from Captain Davidson and I think it's.
Probably had to live in the committee for at least a week or two.
In a related bill, S48, just because they took testimony, were they emphatically in support of this, or should we have testimony from law enforcement and DMV to further consider this language?
I can't speak, fully for them, but I heard only support for the bill and they made changes in response
But
to
that's 48.
the catalytic converters.
Yeah,
Why would they care?
no, it's just, I'll tell you, after this discussion, I'd like to discuss the proposal amendment based on conversations this morning. So the House passed the bill, they took testimony from somebody, but now that person is saying that they actually don't support the language as is. So that's the distinction that I'm struggling with. And I'm wondering in
Oh,
this
so what do
case,
you want to do? Concur with
yes.
further amendment then?
if you want, I want to see what the committee thinks, but I have information on that. But did DMV testify on this?
Yes, testified in support.
In support.
Okay.
I think actually Captain Davidson started his testimony with like, I'm not here to tell you to change it. Except he did say, use the Title 23 definition for public
So are
highway.
we all right with this section or we're going?
You might want to reach out to Lieutenant Raplin. He also testified on it on behalf of Vermont State Police.
For this or?
If it's gonna-
No, that's not on the catalytic converters. I don't know anything about catalytic converters.
No, I'm sure they spend hours and hours and hours. I couldn't even begin to want to commit.
I don't want to open this up.
No, let's agree.
I think it's fine. It's not.
We don't have the
It's
time.
not causing any problem.
You have to bring it up.
I don't know that, just probably all types of language that should have been done when they first made it illegal to be, they wanted it to be hands-free. And they didn't know what the loophole was. And so now they're just closing the loophole.
And this is definitely being driven by a known loophole. And one of the things I thought was the most interesting about the testimony that I heard is now they don't, when they pull people over, say, like, were you using your phone? They would say, were you using your phone to like look at a video or send a text message? And then the example, and I think it was Captain Davidson, it might have been Lieutenant Raplin, gave was like, oh no, I was checking my email. And then like, haha, gotcha moment. You just admitted that you were using your phone. So like trying to figure out a way to avoid the, oh, I wasn't using it, I was holding it argument.
Okay, so we're all right with it?
And it's not, just to be clear, it's not stationary if it's on the steering wheel because the steering wheel moves with it. There's no duct taping it to the steering. I'll get to duct tape.
It's hard to get off.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, so you won't see any changes in sections 19 or 20. This was the total abstinence program, and again, this is the one area that there was a question on the floor about. So now it's going to take you to page 30. The total abstinence program language is pretty long. And on page 30, you're going to see that they deleted the motor vehicle noise motorcycle section and the requirement that the labeling be there as required under federal law for motorcycles.
Why did they do that?
They took it out, but they added to section 42, which was what you had as a reporting section on motor vehicle noise, sort of holistically looking at whether or not there should be a change in the inspections or roadside enforcement. They rolled it into that. Should there also be labeling requirements? And that was based on testimony that they heard from the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Let's go.
Can I ask the
Yeah,
Department of
go
Motor Vehicles why their testimony changed between the Senate and the House?
So I believe Tony reached out.
He sent me an email and said, we changed our mind, but he didn't say why.
So part of it is, we want to make sure we do it right. We want to know what we're doing. Changes to the inspection system takes time. I don't know if we would be able to pull that off by then.
Well, that's different than because my understanding, the motorcycle language they had is just federal law. We're just saying like, this is the federal law where we need to do this in Vermont, make sure that we're doing this in Vermont, separate from the study.
What we found is that after 10 years, they don't produce factory parts anymore. So all of a sudden we were unable to, because this talks about it, although the motorcycle's model year stating that the exhaust system meets the AS. So what we found is that after 10 years, they don't produce I think it's EOM, that's what they call part. So it's an aftermarket part. So we found some conflict in what we we're trying to do, we rolled it into the study, trying to make sure we get it right, do it right, and have time to figure out how it rolls into the inspection system.
But we did do it for snowmobiles.
Yes, you did.
Right, and yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah, that's my point.
No inspection. So-
That's the difference.
There's no, this doesn't talk about the inspection.
No.
Right, but again, how was it going to be found that who's going to see it? When is it going to be seen?
Oh, I thought police would if something was really, there's some of those motorcycles that just about take your ears off your head.
Yes, and what we saw from looking at some of the Harley, some of the training bikes, the bumper itself is entirely encased, so you can't see the stamp on the side of it anyway. So again, how do we make it so it's fair to everybody, we're able to enforce it?
So they changed their mind.
Yeah, I guess I'll talk to Tony a little bit more. I don't see a problem with it, but
So do you want me to not put an okay by this?
I don't want to, but I, yeah.
Well, you have a couple hours to get hold of them.
Yeah.
If it's the only thing, but if there's other things, that's a different story.
Okay, I won't put an okay by it.
Yeah, just put okay for now.
Okay,
All right.
so then you've got your changes to the milk permits, and the consolidation down to the 2 ways to haul at 90,000 pounds. No changes there, but I'm just using this as the opportunity to point out that there's this section 22 deleted, and that was because there was a thought at one point that the increase to the fee at the roughly 20% escalator rate was going to be done in this bill for just this one fee, not the big bill. But that language has been fully harmonized. So now if S99 as proposed by the House is enacted and the Senate's version of the big bill with the fees is enacted, you will have a seamless transition to the 2 means of hauling milk at 90,000 pounds with the slight drop in the 1 all product fee. And then that fee would be increased by the 20% escalator effective January 1 of 2024. Chris and other people at JFO are probably so tired of hearing me say that they're on top of it and they're gonna make sure that everything lines up at the end. Chris has updated his spreadsheet to reflect the fact that that increase is not really at the full roughly 20%. So no disagreement between the bodies on the policy goals in those 2 bills. The one goal being shifting to the 2 means to haul milk, the elimination of the $10 permit, and the consolidation down of the all products fee to the milk fee. And then in the other bill, the universal increase of the fees that would then exist on January 1 of 2024. Okay, so I'm gonna say you're okay with the fact that there's that little placeholder reminder section.
Next issue is 47. page
47, page 47, you're into towing, so no changes for anything up to there. And in the towing language, where you're seeing is a new report, and this is a 2-process report. The first is an oral report after 6 months of there not being a $16,000 cap and statute on the total reimbursement. So for those first 6 months of fiscal year 2024, they're going to need to report back on the amount paid and a summary of any changes to department processes related to the payment of the towing of abandoned motor vehicle fees.
$16,000, we're gonna do all this.
An oral report, and then there's going to be a written report, and that'll be after
Just
2
get rid of
fiscal
it.
years.
Let's just get rid of it. Let's just get rid of it.
I don't want to die on my sword over this thing, but this
No,
is.
this is just ridiculous. You know, micromanaging right to the end. I mean, we're just taking and making the.
Any changes to department processes related to
But
payment?
still, I mean, it still takes time to do
And then you gotta
it.
do a written report.
That's right, it still takes time to do it, you still got people to do it, like, they don't have staff upon staff to do this, you've taken people that do their regular job to go back and do the reports, it ain't like we got a whole department, we'll send it to the report department, we don't have that.
Did the DMV support this?
We were in agreement with what they were asking for, so they asked for a report back. I think the commissioner spoke in regards to another thing. Basically, if you're interested in information, we're happy to report back at any time.
It's pretty hard for you to say no. So
What
what's
would
the
be in
wishes
your
here?
budget?
What do you want to do?
Well, get rid of it.
Practically, if I may ask to the chair of appropriations, if this blew up and was like 50,000, 55,000, would there just, without this language, be a natural catch where somebody's gonna highlight that?
Yeah, you'd have to probably do a budget adjustment to address it, but the fundamental issue that we're deciding here is if someone went out in good faith at the instruction of the request of a law enforcement officer and it met the abandoned vehicle, are we in fact obligating ourselves to pay for that service that law enforcement has requested? And we said yes. And so it is, in my part, once you say yes, that is a commitment or a responsibility of the state because of public safety to get the vehicle removed, then I don't see how we can say, well, it's 21,000 versus 16 and we're not gonna pay for it. To me, the question is, are we obligated to pay for it? If the answer is yes, then you pay the bill and then you figure out if you have to do a budget adjustment. I don't know why you go through all this to get to, is it by having the constraints and the obligation and the requests coming from law enforcement that we would say, to me, it's that's your obligation and you pay it. I don't know why you go.
Isn't the towers going around looking for these vehicles, they're getting contacted to go out there and to get rid of them.
Morning.
Exactly, so let's just
You know,
make them
it
jump
seems
through
like
hoops
it's
to
kind
do
of
it.
information that we could have, just as part of their budget presentation.
So, do I sense we want it out?
I do.
I get consensus is out. Okay,
I just see it as unnecessary work,
all right,
It's
so
so important, ask for it.
now we go to what, page 49?
Page 48,
48.
and you'll see that the language that you have included on the towers lien has been deleted. And I wouldn't say in its place, but in conjunction with deleting that, there is now a towing working group that's being added, and that is gonna be at the bottom of page 49. So the way the towing working group report is structured is the Office of the Attorney General is gonna be the lead on it. And the Office of the Attorney General needs to consult with the Department of Financial Regulation, the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Office of Professional Regulation, and the Office of the Vermont State Treasurer. So DFR, that's insurance, DMV, vehicles, OPR, regulated businesses, state treasurer, abandoned property. So that's why those are included.
Is that the one Vince Luzzi's been driving us crazy about?
Yes.
So the Attorney General shall engage in a working group process in consultation with those
Did we
entities.
take testimony from the Attorney General's office?
Yes.
We took it.
No, they did.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, I was not able to be there, and it's like the one video that was lost to the ether, so I can't tell you even a little bit of what was said because I haven't heard it,
This
and I
is-
would love to have heard it.
This language.
So it's out of the bill, but yet we're still gonna study it.
This is the language that came from the Towers Association.
No.
This language was crafted by House Transportation
Okay.
after hearing testimony from, and we're gonna get to the stakeholders. The
Okay.
working group needs to include stakeholder engagement in at least one public hearing. And the following, at a minimum, need to be invited to participate as a stakeholder. These are the entities that House Transportation took testimony from, not all of them, but most of them. So the stakeholders, and these are in alphabetical order, are the AAA of Northern New England, the Associated General Contractors of Vermont, which House Transportation did take testimony from, the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, which House Transportation took testimony from, the Vermont Bankers Association, they took testimony
Wow.
from, the Vermont Insurance Agents Association did not take testimony from,
This is huge.
the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, I don't believe they took testimony from them on this. Vermont Legal Aid, they didn't take testimony from them on towing this year. The Vermont Towing Association, they took testimony from them. The Vermont Truck and Bus Association, they took testimony from them. And VPERG, I don't think they took testimony from them.
You just got a group of people going out, they're getting called to go tow a vehicle, and that's what they're doing, and then it's just blown up into something that's just crazy.
Okay, so I just want to say that the report is on more than just the towers being called to tow a vehicle. So I think it would help before you finish your conversation on it to look at what the study needs to look at, which is pricing of pleasure car and commercial vehicle towing and recovery, including from state and town highways that are restricted based on motor vehicle size, crash site remediation, including any costs that are
That's what the
borne
Attorney General wants DMV to do it.
by the towing companies, storage practices, including pricing, vehicle access for removal of personal belongings, and vehicle access for removal of cargo, practice relating to the abandonment or suspected abandonment, if it's necessary or appropriate, any applicable recommendations for amendments to state statute, best practices from other states, and anything else that the Office of the Attorney General deems pertinent to the study. One of the things that's, I think, being balanced with the testimony that you got from the Towing Association about them being called to tow vehicles is a lot of the complaints that have been reflected in bills that have been introduced in the House for the last several bienniums about predatory towing practices and about access to vehicles after it's being towed, and people who get their vehicle towed and then they can't get their belongings from it, and they're sort of being held hostage, and then fees accumulate. So I think this has morphed into something much larger
Oh.
than towing companies are being called to get a vehicle from the side of the road.
Maybe we should just get rid of it.
I think so.
It's becoming.
It's just something that's just so big that it just doesn't even make any sense. It just doesn't
I
make
don't know.
sense.
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know.
I mean, it's that, I have some questions about it, but it's just asking the Attorney General to look at the study and talk to people when they do the study.
Yep, and they file a written report with a number of committees on or before December 15th of
You've got
2023.
a working group.
Right.
Well, it's not, well, it says working group, but there isn't really a working group because it's just the AG has to consult with these people and then they have to
But it says
be
that
invited to participate as a stakeholder.
And they don't have to participate, but the burden will be on the AG
Participation in the
to,
stakeholder could be fill out the survey. I mean, they,
or participate in this one hearing that we're personally inviting.
you know, or submit testimony or something like that. I don't know what. And then like in subsection C when it says the study, maybe that's just because in B it says that they're the working group, or no, it's an A where it says shall engage a working group process to
Yeah.
set.
And what would be the purpose of this? Help me out. understand. All these people who are, what's the purpose?
To have the AG do
Yeah,
a
to get
report.
to beat those bad towers. That's what it's.
It just
after.
includes any recommendations it deems appropriate. That's.
Well, my car was off the road and my friend had their car towed and it was $55, but then mine was the same exact thing. And then come to find out, no, it wasn't the same exact thing. It was down over the bank and we had to do that. And they charged me $175. It's just
If the Attorney
crazy.
General is willing to do it, and we have trust in the Attorney General to be fair and, you know, open.
It just to me, it seems like they're looking to start punishment before they're even aware of anything. And that's what it looks like to me.
Well, I think that's their goal, is to become aware of it by talking to all these people and saying, are there recommendations? I mean, I think I trust the Attorney General not to be, you know,
I don't.
to attack the.
I think that this is driven in Chittenden County and this is what it is. And then there's all these poor people who are getting their cars towed and by predatory towing companies, and that this is because we've tried to deal with this forever and a long time. And now we're gonna finally get those people who are causing harm to poor people. And I am not anybody in this room that wants to protect people who can't pay any more than me. But I think this is going unfairly after an industry who is just doing what they're asked to do.
Is this created from any complaints or how is all this?
I guess it must be from
They got a lot of
Consumer?
testimony, and this built from the testimony that House Transportation took from most of the entities that are listed as stakeholders.
Maybe I can speak a little bit to that. So this is an ongoing issue in Chittenden County. So I have constituents and residents that in Burlington, they have lots of issues. The car gets towed and they need to get access to something in the car and it's not always clear and how they can get that, how much it's cost, what they can charge. I understand from conversations with the Truck and Bus Association, as well as what represents Enterprise Rent-A-Car, there is some national legislation, some recommended legislation that would be wise for Vermont to consider, and that's been brought forward the last 6-8 years. It just hasn't gone anywhere. I agree that I don't want this framed as let's get the towers. Towers provide a very valuable service. If anything, this has just been a fits and started over the years to not get to a point where we can have a good conversation around the table about how to protect the consumer as well as protect the towers to have fair
We're
environment.
gonna start talking about what they can charge, what they can't charge, and it's just something I don't wanna be part of.
So I know that oftentimes people say, oh, it's just a report, but it's just a report. In order for there to be a change like that model legislation, which the bill that was introduced this year is probably the closest to tracking the model legislation and the recommendations that have come from some consumer protection reports, you can get the report and do nothing with it.
Yeah, that's true.
The question I do have is,
I can tell you, well, sorry, go ahead.
and I think you were gonna go there next, Jared, tell me if I'm segueing too appropriately, but why the Attorney General and not, I don't see DMV in this at all. It seems like DMV.
They're a consultant, a required consultant entity.
Yeah.
Consumers protection standpoint.
Okay, so that's just a question why the Attorney General was home this and not DMV.
Did you take a stand on this anyway? It's an issue of the town.
We were present during the testimony. The Attorney General was brought in regards to consumer protection.
Yeah.
Based on the testimony that was read from various.
Consumer protection, isn't that normally in commerce?
So House Commerce is one of the receiving entities of the report, and House Commerce was consulted on the report language.
And
Yes, good.
I heard that DMV didn't want to do it. That DMV didn't want to do if this process was gonna happen, DMV was like, I'd rather the Attorney General.
Absolutely.
There's 11 entities involved here. Everybody's gonna have a bite at the apple at this thing. And they're just gonna absolutely positively decimate a hardworking industry. And I hear you, Anthony. Yeah, I hear it. Well, it's just a study. It's not just a study. It's a study of how can we regulate these people and just pound them. That's what I see.
I think that's gonna be the Associated General Contractors of Vermont and the Vermont Towing Association.
I think everybody's gonna get a bite at the apple of it. Everybody's gonna just talk about how bad they are, and oh my God, my sister had her car towed, my son had her car towed, oh my goodness gracious, and here we go, because everybody's had a car towed.
There was a complaint issued to have this language put in the first place in the House side, is that,
Yeah, it's been there for a while.
okay?
Representative Rachelson has been very passionate on this topic the last few years, few cycles, and she's got very, very passionate and troublesome stories about consumers and
Well, we actually have testimony that, in the past where sometimes law enforcement will skip a towing company because they know their charges are higher, so if somebody is really viewed as destitute, they'll call the entity that they know's fees are the most modest, but, I
Is
don't
there
know.
anyone on this list that you did not like there, or is there, I mean, if this is gonna go somewhere, is it something that we wanna change or not change?
I mean,
or-
Vermont Truck and Bus has already just decimated the towing industry already. I mean, that's just people I know about. They've absolutely positively just decimated it. They're the ones that have caused a lot of this problems, which I can't understand, because they're almost part of they're people out on the road trying to make a living. And they have vehemently just brutalized the towers. And I don't understand why they have. And they all should be brothers and sisters in the same business as far as I'm concerned, but and all these other ones, I don't know. I don't even know why the Association of Vermont Credit Unions would want to be on there. I don't know why the Associated General Contractors would want to be on there. I don't know why the bankers would want to be on there.
So the liens for the credit union piece and the Associated General Contractors, because they have vehicles that are towed.
So
Yes.
Vince Aluzzi's recommendation, which I have in front of me, he has 5 entities having a representation: Vermont Towing Association, Vermont Makers Association, Vermont Truck and Bus Association, Department of Public Safety, and Vermont Police Association, as well as VLCT. I feel like there's a middle ground here that if we look at what Vince Aluzzi, who I believe is advocating for the towing industry, he does see some of these as having valid perspectives, but 11 does seem unwieldy. So I support revising this language. We can also suggest striking it. I wouldn't support doing that because I've heard the passionate pleas, and I think this is worth more attention. And I sort of side with Anthea's view that it's just a report, but I can certainly be outvoted on that.
So our choice is we limit it, we'll move on. Number 2, we rewrite it or consider, I know nothing about this, he left the paper here. If that's something that we want to replace or.
Well, the recommendation is DMV. DMV is basically saying that's not a role that they want to take on. So that's, so that recommendation has been discussed and.
Okay, this is nothing you want then.
No regulate the talks.
Okay, so that's out. I'm just trying to get our pieces here. Do we want to eliminate something on here, or is there a move to eliminate?
Well, I'm gonna find a middle ground, and we have somebody that's, if we can't eliminate it, I would go with Vince's language. I could get there.
I'm hearing that they don't want to do that. I mean, we can make them do it, but I mean, they don't.
Well, I don't wanna make anybody do anything.
Vince's language with the Attorney General's office and sort of that overseeing group consulting with those 5, and maybe a couple more. I don't know.
To me, all the Attorney General that has to do is, doesn't say they have to be on the work, they shall be invited to participate. So you could just, I mean, if having them listed is somehow offensive, you could just say, the Attorney General could figure out who they want to talk to, who they've seen this. So they're probably going to ask the same people whether they're written in there or not.
And there's the catch-all at the end. The 11th item in that list is anyone else that they.
So you could just do 11. And, I trust the Attorney General to figure out who they need to talk to come up
Do
with.
you want to go down the list and eliminate the ones you don't want, or?
I would say list them all, or just.
We're just two stakeholders,
Just do number
identify,
11.
Vince also has emphasis that we could mash into this or to align with their charge. And so I'm trying to overlay this language to try to find the middle ground.
This is representing who? So the towers want Vince's amendment, is that what I'm
That's my
getting?
understanding. That's my impression.
Is that what you're thinking? Or I don't know.
Well, the towers would just like to see this language go away. And then stay with what they had proposed before, was raise them from the $40 to the $125, and then give them time to store, to the stored vehicles that they have, give them the extra time to get in there to get those VINs validated so that they can liquidate those vehicles. And then we've morphed into this to where, oh boy, it's, they're bad.
So
There are no changes to that language. All of those sections have stayed.
So they went to Vince and want this, I'm just trying to.
No,
So
this is
why
what the
did
House
they-
wanted. And so Vince is trying to, that,
We're not about the same thing.
okay, sorry.
This is this what the towers went to Vince? I'm trying to figure out the
Yes,
relationship.
yes,
It's
Vince is representing the towers.
Okay.
Right, the towers don't want that lean business in there anymore. That's what I've been
So we
told.
deleted them.
Right, exactly. So that's what that is right here, right?
Well, that was the latest copy I got from Vince this morning. I don't, Vince hasn't talked to me at all about this. I'm just saying what was on my desk. I think I gave you a copy, that's the same
Does that
copy.
say-
It does. It should survey the lien laws.
That's not it.
Oh.
Let's not, right. So
So I
let's
was,
just worry about, with all due respect to the committee, and not trying to tell the committee what to do. My preference would be to worry about what we have in front of us on a bill, whether we like it or not, because we have all this other stuff floating around. It's not on the bill. And so if we could just try to figure out what we want to do with what we have in front of us on a bill that we're trying to get voted out is what I would prefer to do. And not add anything else.
Well, we can't make a decision right now. We could postpone this till tomorrow, but I'm just trying to find some common ground, yes, no. I sense there's a mixture in this committee, and I don't know where to go right now. So I'm asking the committee,
So,
what would you like to do?
it sounds like you are at a position where you're not going to agree with them because you want to delete the 2 reports on the removal of that reimbursement cap. and you're not sure about the motorcycle noise. So I think you've passed in terms of your like 3 options, you're not going to agree. So now you're at the point where you're deciding, do you go to a committee of conference or do we have a further proposal of amendment? It sounds like at a minimum, you have a further proposal of amendment that deletes the report, deletes their section 34. I have not seen Vince's language. I'm happy to try and write a merged version. Email would be
They're
great.
still pushing for the lead,
That's, what's,
and this is.
that's not,
Did we
that's,
agree with the House that deleted the lead section that we had in?
I have a blank there. I thought that you kind of needed to talk about these 2 sections together.
I could agree to that with the House to delete the lien language.
I think we should come back to this tomorrow. We don't have the bill yet, so when we get the bill tomorrow, the next day, we can.
Yeah, I'm not getting kind of a consensus of what's going on. There's a lot of different, and before we do something in a rapid approach, let's rethink what we're going to do. That's my,
And I'd love 5 minutes, like a minutes time when that's coordinated.
so let's go over this, right?
So I got it from Bob Bonamy on the text. No, we don't want the study. Vince was common ground if they chose the study. That's from the towers.
Okay, let's postpone it till tomorrow.
So I'm gonna put a circle by, for if you haven't made a decision on the deletion of your section 34 and the inclusion of their section 35. I can do the last things really quickly and then I can stop talking and you can do parallel converters. You're gonna go all the way to page 59.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end here, so, okay.
This is for the DMV modernization language. They made some small language tweaks to your findings. Again, I'm gonna say that findings are like not really necessary. They're just painting the picture. So I would look at the language and make sure that you're okay with them, or if not, you can change them around. Made a change to the number of reports that come back. You had 2 reports, they have 3 reports. They changed the dates of the reports to better, now that there's just more conversation and it wasn't so rushed, align with the timeline from the DMV, and they eliminated the joint meetings, which House and Senate Transportation could choose to do if they chose to do them during that session. So changed some findings, got rid of the mandatory joint meetings, and made it 3 reports as opposed to 2 reports.
All right,
And then we already talked about it, section 43, this is the bottom of page 62, top of page 63, outreach to municipalities on speed limits, just requires them to do outreach in consultation with the league and regional planning commissions. And then finally, we already talked about this, but their section 42, which is just sort of in a weird place just because of how I did the side by side, bottom of page 64. On page 65 is where you're seeing that in addition to the study and report needing to address at a minimum, this is where you get possible options to address excessive motor vehicle noise that do not involve noise testing, such as visual inspections for modifications, whether as part of enforcement or the state motor vehicle inspection, and labeling on 1 or more components of a exhaust system. So this is the place where the motorcycle labeling language sort of found its home in part of the report. And that's in other changes.
so where are we?
Well, outreach, they bought outreach to municipalities on speed limits. ALT have I mean, they're working all the time with them anyway. With municipalities, the district offices are, yeah. Is that anything that's a problem? No.
As far as the noise, we don't put the burden on the inspections, right?
Nothing is changing in law now. It's a report, and this is a report that's not coming back until 2025.
Okay. So any concerns or where we are?
This is very interesting. They want members of the House. We just normally report to committees.
Yeah.
Why are we adding this?
So again, I'm just gonna say that this is a legislative finding, and the concern here was because it's talking about during legislative adjournment, and you are not, as House and Senate Transportation, meeting as House and Senate Transportation during adjournment. So it would be reporting, even though the report is going to House and Senate Transportation, it's really members visually that have the oversight. Again, it's a finding. And I know you don't like findings to begin with,
The
but
Bibs
it's a
love
finding.
findings, but they're nothing, I mean, findings are not, they don't go into.
Yeah, and I think findings would come into play if there was, like litigation here and there was looking for legislative intent. But this is, again, you're painting a very colorful picture with this language for why having this process of collaboration is necessary. And I think it sort of is laying some of the groundwork for how a modernization project will be looked at in the future and the potential need to have the General Assembly be on board with statutory revisions in tandem with the modernization project. You could delete the findings.
Did this come out of the issue we had in the Senate?
Yeah, probably did in terms of delegation.
Yes.
When we said no standing?
Yes.
Okay, tired. That-
Yeah. So this is the replacement language, and I mean, this was something that was crafted quite significantly by legislative council on Thursday night, and then Senator Hardy came in, early Friday, and then you were on the floor on Friday before third reading. So as the person who wrote virtually all of these findings based on testimony in Senate government operations, and then the further testimony in House Transportation, I think they reflect what was said in those committees, but I don't think you need them.
Well, leave them. You've spent so much time drafting them. Why would we not want to utilize your?
I will not be
Okay,
offended if you
so-
want them to go.
So we just have to go back and look at tomorrow morning,
The towing.
the towing section.
Towing and Andy had a concern about the motorcycles.
Right, you're gonna check that out. So,
So if someone sends me the language from towing assistance we did, I can try working on something that combines them, but I'm gonna have to make guesses, so the more guidance I can be given, the better.
well, you've got, for us, you can work with her, and I don't know, I'm just trying to put this thing together tomorrow. We go overnight to think about it. I like the consensus for the meeting.
Me too.
Okay, anything else?
Nothing for me. I will take a stab at it and I will circulate it
Thank you very much.
widely.
Okay, Tom Chittenden, you had something you want to talk about, the catalytic converters,
I do,
right?
I do.
Okay. So we got a couple minutes there, and we'll do that.
Great. There's 5 copies of this. This is an email thread, just so the closest thing we have to testimony on this topic. I'm sharing my screen. Since our discussion yesterday, I did reach out to Senator Sears. Senator Sears suggested that I, in fact, speak with Senator Hardy because the last section, section 5 of this bill, which is now being shared, this is section 5 of S-48 as proposed by the House, is fully in the jurisdiction of the domain of Senate Government Office. So in a couple of emails to Senator Hardy, as well as additional phone conversations and then email threads with the Deputy Criminal Justice Council, a member of the Deputy for the Criminal Justice Council, it has been strongly suggested that we strike section 5. And this is an email thread just showing that they did verbally request that they would not like to see section 5 passed into law. And that was then, I just wanted to confirm it via email. They have concerns with the open-endedness of this language and the additional administrative burden without additional clarity or specificity. I'm not going to speak for House members, but I did touch base with Chair Marcotte this morning, and he said they did hear from him. So Deputy Burkell did testify. I watched the testimony this morning, and the concerns weren't necessarily raised in the House. So I think this is part of the normal process. I don't sense that this is a deal breaker for the House. I think this was just something they saw as something useful. So I'd like to propose, but I guess since we don't have ownership of this bill, but everything I'm hearing, it makes sense to. Do we?
We do, it's back and we have to concur.
Well, it's on the House floor.
On the Senate.
It's on the Senate.
Senate.
But since it's just the House,
No, what we,
it's on the Senate calendar, but somebody told me it's not technically in the.
it's technically not, but we have to get up and say,
Yeah,
we
one
want
way
to
or the other,
concur
we concur or
with
not.
further amendment.
Right.
And that's, I guess, what we're asking, do we want to amend by
We have to
removing
make a
section
decision
5?
to get it off the calendar.
Yeah.
So I took the liberty of talking with David Hall, and I wanted to have this conversation. You all support me, and I can add your names if you so desire, to just striking section 5 as further proposal of amendment. Based on conversations with them. It can be just me, it can be.
No,
I'm fine with that.
if the council said they didn't want it,
That's what this email thread
Right, yeah, I
confirms.
read the, yeah.
They support us striking the language which was verbally communicated to Chair Hardy.
And they kind of feel like it was, they were misunderstood in the House with what got added in there.
They didn't, I watched the tape, I didn't hear them speak in opposition to this, they informed the discussion and the language was then added
Afterwards.
Yeah, which I understand it sometimes happens, if that makes sense.
But it didn't go to GovOps in the House, it went to Commerce. So you spoke to Senator Hardy about this,
Senator Sears directed me to speak to Senator
Alright.
Hardy, so I have.
and that's why you did it, okay. And, well, we were concerned about
Senator
this.
Hardy likes our committee a lot.
She would, Senator Hardy would like to see this language struck as well.
Well, I thought it, when I read it, it seemed like it was, could be an issue, so it's
Right,
gonna be
if I'm
followed up.
doesn't want to.
And as I say, they're in the midst of that 3-year overhaul, and not only that, it was much broader, it was all the legislative, the changes that they would have to keep
I mean,
track of.
basically, this is gratuitous and that, this is the whole purpose of what they do is to inform what the laws are, so this is what they do anyway, so it's kind of extra work.
So,
So you want to out for this on behalf of the committee, or you want to do it yourself? Or what did you
I
want to do?
think I'll jump in on that. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I don't know what did you ask Bluebird, if the committee wants, usually you get up, I don't think we actually, we do have to, do we have to do individually, we don't have
That's
possession
my
of the
understanding, we have to be just listed in.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay, well, I don't mind,
I
why
don't
don't we,
mind
why don't we all be
All right, so-
listed?
So I will see if I can have concur with further proposal amendment today with this amendment.
Okay.
And I'll add all of our.
Here, yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you for your work on it. I think we got a bill that started out a little weak and we got some more teeth into it, and it is what it is, so I like this bill.
Okay, anything else today? And we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
All right.
All right?
Yeah, just be careful, Jane, you weren't in there, were you? No. What did they, okay, maybe he said morning committees were gonna end on Thursday, and then we were gonna start the 10 o'clocks and then the 2 times a day
That's next week.
next week. Okay.